Welcome everyone. My name is Joanna Kerr and I'm a librarian at London's Central Library. This is the last of our Green in the City series, but this year I am very happy to announce that our partners at the London Environmental Network, City of London, and London Public Library will be continuing with a winter edition of Green in the City with a deeper focus on climate change issues and local action that we can all take. Look for an announcement in late December for more details. And one of the books I wanted to mention tonight, I'll try and show it in my little box here. It's On Fire, The Burning Case for a Green New Deal by Naomi Klein. It's a collection of 10 years of Klein's public talks and essays that focuses on collective solutions to make global systemic actions. This and other material related to tonight's topic will be sent in a follow-up message where you can follow the links for downloads or to place a hold at the library. Before starting our program tonight, we would like to take this time together to acknowledge that we in London, Ontario, are speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Lenape, and Neutral peoples. This land is covered by several treaties, including Treaty 6, the London Township Treaty of 1796. We acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank the generations of peoples who have taken care of this land. Together and going forward, may we recognize our own responsibility in the stewardship of this land. If you would like to learn more about Treaty 6, the library holds materials on this and other treaties and land cessions. I'll include the titles of these books in the chat. Thanks, Leah, and back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Joanna. So as Joanna mentioned, this is the final event of our 2020 Green in the City series. I'm really excited to get started with tonight's presentations about a green economic recovery. And thank you everyone for being here tonight to join us. First, I just wanted to go over the agenda for the evening. So after we have our introductions, we will hear from our first regional speaker, Priyanka Lloyd from Green Economy Canada. Following that, we'll hear from Mike Fabro from the City of London, and then we will have, we'll pause to do some breakout discussions in breakout rooms on Zoom here. Following that, we'll hear from Grand Chief Joel Abram of the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians. Then we will hear from our final speaker of the evening, Gabriella Kalapos from Clean Air Partnership. And last but not least, we will have some time for a Q&A period. So throughout the session, please write your questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end. So now at this point, I will invite Skylar Frank, Executive Director of the London Environmental Network, to share a few words about the meaning of a green local economic recovery.
Thanks, Leah. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us tonight at our final Green in the City event. I just wanted to say a quick thanks to the team and also the organizing committee for putting this series on. I've been so pleased with the interest and conversations that have been happening during the sessions, and many of you guys have come to multiple ones, so thank you for joining us again. Tonight, we are talking about making big system level changes. And for those changes to occur, we need individuals and our culture to change with it, which is, of course, where you guys come in. You're essential to the important climate action work that's being done locally, provincially, and federally. And I'm hoping that you guys leave tonight with more ideas and inspiration about how to build a low carbon and resilient community and imagining what's possible for a new society. And then together we can work on building it. So I really like this image because I think that we need to be dreaming big and we need to be bold right now, and we need to be working together to build it. So I really love this image because I think it shows what an urban landscape can look like that kind of meets those needs. So whether it's personal lifestyle changes or volunteering with some environmental groups that you might hear about tonight, or advocating to the different levels of government to make those changes, all of these actions together help us build towards a greener society and are very integral into the work that we need to get done to have that green and just recovery from COVID. The team here at the network is also working on some new and inspiring actions, which you will find out more if you sign up for our newsletter, a little plug there. But we're working on next year building out a program that supports home sustainability and home retrofits that we can launch next year. We're also supporting businesses through our Green Economy London program, and we support 6 new projects every year through our incubator. So you can find out more about those different programs and how to get involved by visiting our website. But I just want to say that there's already so much work being done by individuals who are strong and passionate and selfless and who know the importance of our planet and ecosystems and who are willing to put in that work to create that new culture in society and dream about what's possible. And that's all of you guys who are joining us here tonight and doing that good work. So I hope you leave here tonight feeling inspired about what is possible. And thank you for your commitment to helping build a more green and just future. So back to you, Leah, to get us started, and enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you, Skylar. So now I'm going to introduce our speakers of the evening. So first we will hear from Priyanka Lloyd, who is the Executive Director of Green Economy Canada, which is a national nonprofit accelerating the business transition to a low carbon economy. Green Economy Canada works with communities to launch and grow green economy hubs, shares success stories of businesses going green, and engages with policymakers and experts to inform green policies and investments. So we're really excited to hear from Priyanka tonight. We will also hear from Mike Fabro, who is an environmental engineer and sustainability specialist, who is passionate about working to support our transition to a more sustainable society. As the manager of sustainability and resiliency in city planning at the City of London, Mike and his team are responsible for managing citywide natural environmental issues and working collaboratively to coordinate and implement the city's response to the climate emergency. We will also hear from Grand Chief Joel Abram, who hails from the Oneida Nation of the Thames Settlement, is also a member of the Wolf Clan, and his Oneida name is Tewaslack, which I apologize if I mispronounced, but this translates to an axe with 2 blades. Joel is currently 46 years old and has served 12 years on Chief and Council in Oneida, 6 as a councillor and 6 as the elected chief. And lastly, we will hear from Gabby Kalapos, who has been working to motivate and support local government action on clean air and climate change for over 20 years. Her passion has been encouraging the uptake, transfer, and implementation of clean air and climate change actions, as well as the building of partnerships that enable collaboration and support between the community and all levels of government. So we're really excited to hear from all our speakers. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite Priyanka to begin our first presentation of the evening.
Great, thanks so much. My audio is good.
Excellent.
Okay, perfect. It's really nice to be here with all of you. I'm excited to kick things off by sharing our perspective at Green Economy Canada on what we think is needed for a green recovery. And no surprises by the title of this presentation, we're going to focus on the importance of investing in small and medium-sized enterprises as the cornerstone of a green recovery. So let me tell you a bit more about that. So just to kind of set the stage, we know that, through COVID-19 this year, emissions are projected to be about 7 to 8% lower than in 2019. So not an insignificant amount of reductions that's been achieved just in the way that our world has shifted. But we also know that economic lockdown, low economic growth is not a low emissions strategy. In the words of the International Energy Agency here, it's a strategy that would serve to only further impoverish the world's most vulnerable populations. So we know that if we're going to make sure that we have a thriving economy that can survive within the limits of the planet, we're going to need to decouple economic growth from emissions. Many voices have been calling for a green recovery. One of these voices is the Task Force for Resilient Recovery, which was sort of an independent group that was struck of financial and environmental and economic experts looking at what would be needed to kickstart a truly green recovery. And this task force was calling for about a $55 billion investment from the government of Canada over the next 5 years, specifically to invest in climate resilient and energy efficient buildings, to jumpstart our electric vehicle production, zero emissions vehicles production and adoption, helping to support our clean tech sector so that we can become a clean tech leader across the globe, restoring the nature that protects and sustains us, and then really investing in job skills and training that can help us grow our competitiveness in the global marketplace. In September, when the government delivered their speech from the throne, we saw many of these planks reflected in that speech. And what remains to be seen, I think, is a budget to know how serious we are in investing in these things and whether we are going to really seize this moment to make bold investments that can kickstart us into this future that we know is needed. One of the things that was not there and has been, chronically overlooked in these conversations around climate action and a green recovery is a focus on green stimulus for small and medium-sized enterprises. And this is something that, if we're serious about getting to this net zero emissions future by 2050, not just recovering from COVID, but actually making this transition, SMEs are a demographic that we need to focus on better engaging. So small and medium-sized enterprises make up over 99% of businesses in London, over 99% of businesses in Canada. They employ 9 in 10 private sector workers and contribute to more than half of our GDP. So historically, when we've thought about engaging the business community in climate action, things have focused on the heavy emitters. We're not going to get the kind of transition and emissions reductions needed if we don't engage the bulk of the economy in this work. And small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of our economy. So as Leah mentioned, this is really a core part of our work at Green Economy Canada. We are a national not-for-profit dedicated to accelerating the business transition to a vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable low-carbon future. And one of the ways that we do that is supporting the launch and growth of green economy hubs like the one in London, Green Economy London, run by the London Environmental Network. We also share success stories of businesses going green to try and inspire other businesses to follow suit. And we work collaboratively with policymakers to inform green policies and investments that can accelerate business sustainability efforts. We know that there's an important feedback loop there where policymakers need to know that there's a support of the business community in advancing some of these more progressive policies. And likewise, businesses need the support of policymakers in order to advance some of their own sustainability work. Our network consists of currently 8 programs across the country that are in operation, with a provincial hub that's set to launch in New Brunswick next year. Across these programs, Hub supports businesses with advancing these 8 sustainable development goals that you see on the slide here. And we're really excited to think about how we could scale up our efforts in supporting local communities through a green recovery. So there are over 300 businesses of all sectors and sizes engaged across local green economy hubs, specifically working to set and achieve sustainability targets. And these really run the gamut from manufacturing companies, retail, healthcare. There's an airport here that's shown on the screen, not-for-profit organizations, and local organizations like in London, like London Brewing and Hemans that you might be familiar with here. And altogether, the 300 green economy leaders, as we call them, have committed to reducing over 180,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions and have already reduced over 200,000 tons. So that's the equivalent of taking about 42,000 cars off the road for 1 year. So all of this to say that our network has a lot of experience, over a decade of experience, working with businesses on taking climate action. And we have seen how businesses can be such a powerful lever to move the needle, as well as not just the environmental benefits that this can achieve, but the business benefits that accrue to businesses who take this seriously. So I wanted to provide just a couple of case studies. These case studies will focus just on the financial side because we know that right now through COVID, there is such a strong focus on, particularly for businesses, how they can reduce costs and get back on their feet through that lens. So take your credit union, which is a small financial services company in Ottawa. They installed a new building automation system which shaved about 30% off their electricity bill. And these are savings that they're going to get year after year. Walker Emulsions is a company out of Burlington, Ontario. They installed a water softener to reduce buildup in their process heat exchangers, which was able to save them about $43,000 per year. Heenan's in London was able to double their production while keeping energy use flat by upgrading their greenhouse. And Veriform, a small steel and metal fabricator out of Cambridge, Ontario, they've been working for over a decade to implement more than 100 sustainability projects. They've been able to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 77% while doubling their facility size and growing by 30%. And all of this work has led to over $2 million in savings, which if you ask Paul, the owner here who's on the slide, he'll tell you that his work, his investments in this low carbon piece has really enabled them to survive things like steel and aluminum tariffs that the US imposed not that long ago. So I share these examples with you because as we think about a green recovery, you know, for us, it's not just about the importance of taking climate action, but we really see investments in this kind of work as being a critical plank of enabling businesses to build their strength and resilience so that they can thrive, not just post-COVID, but in the shift to a low carbon future. So back in April, we were approached to try and identify some ways that SMEs could be supported through a green recovery. How could we specifically help SMEs get back on their feet while also taking climate action? And SMEs are an important demographic because they often lack the money, the time, and the knowledge and capacity that larger organizations have. They don't have in-house sustainability teams. They often don't have a roster of projects that are scoped and ready to go so that when new incentive programs come out, they know which ones to apply for. They operate in a bit of a different space, and they need special considerations to take advantage of programs and policies around the green economy. So we've put together a suite of recommendations that really follow under these broad buckets. So financial incentives, building internal knowledge and skills, and investing in the community support that can help businesses build capacity and sustain action. On the financial incentive side, we know that incentive programs make a huge difference in businesses being able to undertake these kinds of projects and prioritize them. We also know that, through COVID-19 and post-pandemic, SMEs are going to be particularly cash-strapped to be able to undertake these kinds of projects. So not only should the government invest in retrofit programs, but they need to design these kinds of incentive programs in a way that's going to be accessible for an SME audience. We're proposing that the government invest in encouraging the broad adoption of smaller greenhouse gas reduction projects, so somewhere within the 10K to 100K range. This is in stark contrast to previous programs where the threshold has been something like $4 million in order to apply, which has been really inaccessible for small and medium-sized organizations. We can also reduce the upfront cash burden for businesses by providing grants and low-interest loans, just to make that a little bit easier for them to take on. But we need to go further than that, and this is where historically any sort of stimulus programs around climate action have not invested very much, and that's to build the internal knowledge and skills of businesses to undertake this work. So when we think about green businesses, some have labeled green businesses as those that focus in the clean tech sector or have environmental products and services. But if we're trying to get to a net zero emissions future, every business needs to see themselves as a green business. And the way to do that is to build the internal knowledge and skills of existing staff to be able to connect their day-to-day operations with solving some of these social and environmental challenges. So green stimulus programs focused on training subsidies for existing staff to build their knowledge and skills in this area, to take courses, all of those things would be highly welcomed. There's also existing programs like the NRCan Energy Manager program that allows SMEs to bring an in-house sustainability expert And this is also really valuable because without these kinds of programs, being able to access this kind of expertise would be out of reach. And then finally, as we think about sustaining action towards a net zero emissions future, we think it's really important that stimulus widens its lens a little bit and thinks about investing in the community support and infrastructure that will allow businesses to continue on this work. And so one of the ways that this can be supported is through something like a green economy hub model. So one of the recommendations that we have is to be able to scale up the work that we're doing with green economy hubs across Canada, and to scale up the work that's happening specifically in London to be able to support a larger number of businesses towards this net zero emissions future. So I want to just quickly share with you what is the hub model, because I think it's a nice way to kind of bring together all of these different pieces around green stimulus in a cohesive package. So green economy hubs bring together support and publicly recognized businesses in setting and achieving sustainability targets. When a business joins a local hub, they get coaching and one-on-one support through a process of measuring their environmental footprint, developing an action plan, setting a public reduction target, and then reporting on their progress year after year to stakeholders. They get access to events that help them build their knowledge and skills on a variety of topics and learn from experts. They get access to peer learning and networking opportunities so they can learn, connect, and share with one another to build that thriving local ecosystem of businesses taking action. It's a one-stop shop where businesses can go to get funding and policy updates and connect funding programs to the work that they're trying to achieve in a really strategic manner. And then they get recognized for the work that they're undertaking by a credible third-party nonprofit to celebrate their successes, raise their profile, and inspire others to follow suit. So the success stories that the hub is generating over time ideally starts to build this network as other people get involved. And demand for green products and services grows because more and more of these businesses are undertaking this work, reaching a critical mass. And as this is happening, what this means is that public and political will for green policies and investments also starts to grow, that positive feedback loop that I shared earlier when talking about our work. And then the standard for what the business status quo changes, and over time, a critical mass of businesses are engaged to make sustainability the norm. So we see something like a hub model, this kind of model can be applied on the residential side, but the idea that what we're doing is investing in the infrastructure that's going to kind of bring together all of these different stimulus programs and ensure that there's some kind of sustainable way to support businesses over the long term to actually get to this transition that we need. So I want to end by recognizing that climate action is a health issue. It's an environmental issue, an economic issue, an equity issue, an Indigenous issue, a youth issue, a moral issue. Climate action is not a political issue. And so as we think about the need for a green recovery, as we look ahead to what a budget may or may not entail and what how that might be at the mercy of a potential another election cycle, I think it's really important for each of us to remember that a green recovery is not just important and critical at this moment in time, it's important for the future that we need to get to in order to have a livable planet and a just and inclusive economy and society. And so, as we move forward, I would encourage all of you to make sure that you share your voices with elected officials. They do listen, it does matter. And that to know that there are a lot of people that really support this work and can see a better way forward. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Priyanka. Now I will invite Mike Fabro to share his screen and begin his presentation.
Hello, everyone. Sorry. There's the video. It's not fun without some technical difficulties, I would assume. All right, I can assume everyone can hear me now, all right? Quick check-in from Skylar. Okay, perfect, thanks so much. Thanks very much for having me here. I'm here today to talk about the Climate Emergency Action Plan that's currently under development for London. And I want to make clear that this is it's a community plan. So although it's being driven by the city right now in terms of pulling the plan together, it really is something that we want everybody to realize goes well beyond just actions that the city is going to be taking, and dives deep into the community and the sorts of things that we can do as individuals, businesses, organizations in London. So I'm going to flash this slide again at the end of the presentation, but just wanted to make clear that everyone knew that we do have a whole bunch of online engagement that's currently open. So the getinvolved.london.ca/climate site is where you can find a bunch of different resources, some really cool information around the initiative, and also some information about the past actions at the city. We're going to have a really interesting climate action simulator tool coming online within the next well, hopefully a few days, could be next week, where you can go on and actually look at what different climate action scenarios would look like in London based on prioritizing different actions in different sectors. So I implore everybody to head over there when you get a moment, and we definitely want to hear from you. So specifically talking about climate action, I mean, I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but a quick rundown. So, we're talking about mitigation and adaptation. So reducing our greenhouse gas emissions while also adapting to the challenges that climate change is bringing forward, including extreme weather. And we know that the City of London has set a net zero greenhouse gas emissions goal for 2050. This was, as a result of the Climate Emergency Declaration last year. And so we've got our work cut out for us, but this is the scientific target that is generally accepted as sort of the target to reach that will prevent us from catastrophic warming of beyond those 2 degrees Celsius, pardon me. And on the adaptation side, there's many impacts across the world that we hear about. Here in London, we've got a whole pile, whether it's flooding, stressing our stormwater infrastructure, overtopping of rivers causing additional flooding, snow streamers, intense heat, and I've spared you guys from the awful picture of a tick burrowing itself in someone's arm, but there's also the specific health impacts from vector-borne diseases like that we're faced with. And I would be remiss to not mention, of course, the economic impacts. As Priyanka mentioned, that there's lots of economic impacts with climate change, and one of them, as shown here from the data provided by the Insurance Bureau of Canada, is the rising cost of extreme climate events. And you can see sort of the base load of these catastrophic events increasing as you get closer to today in this data. And it's a reality. It's a reality that we're living with, and we really need to take action. And it's not just action in one sector, it's in all sectors. So in terms of our actual greenhouse gas emissions in the city, this is recent data from 2019. You can see last year we're getting pretty close to hitting our 15% below 1990 levels. And with COVID, as Priyanka mentioned, globally we're looking at about a 7 to 8% dip in greenhouse gas emissions. So we're quite confident that we'll hit this 2020 target of 15% below 1990 levels. But we've got a lot of work to do to get down to that 37% below 1990 levels by 2030, which really amounts to cutting our emissions by about a third, so about 1 million tons of CO2 equivalents per year. And when talking about our greenhouse gas emissions, it's important to know where they're actually coming from. So again, this is our recent community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory by sector. And you'll see on the right-hand side there, that dark tall bar is the greenhouse gas emissions from our personal vehicles. And adjacent to that on the left is from housing. So that's emissions related to home heating, water, and as well as sort of electricity usage and all of our appliances and things. Again, just sort of reiterating where those household emissions come from. It's about half from our gasoline and personal vehicle usage, another 31 plus 9% from natural gas, from home heating and water heating, and then of course our methane from organic waste at 7% as well. So the plan that we're putting together, again, it is a community plan, so it's more than just actions that the city can take alone. And we've broadly divided it up into 5 categories. So talking about how we live, how we green, how we move, how we grow, and how we prosper. And specifically with the COVID-19 recovery lens, there's a number of things that have happened to us and that have forced us into lifestyle changes that it's worthwhile taking a good hard look at, because some of these are very climate positive, albeit we're forced into them. we should still consider how we might be able to propagate these behavior changes into the future. So things like, not driving our vehicles as much, really connecting with the outdoors and utilizing active transportation networks and biking, and really sort of finding ourselves in nature again. The whole concept of working from home, right? Reducing the emissions from your transport to work and back, and in many cases, offices that don't need to be running. And then, of course, also focusing on our homes as places where we spend a lot more time. And so there's lots of things to think about there. So the action plan itself, we've created what's called a discussion primer, which is available on our Get Involved site. And it's got included within it about 32 high-level actions that are supported by another 120 smaller sort of discrete actions that we've identified from a canvas of other municipalities across Canada in their efforts to take action on climate change, as well as addressing some of the very specific issues here in London. And what we're really after is to get people's opinions on which actions are tangible things that make sense for the community, that both the city can do and that community partners can do as well and take leadership. So we're really looking for feedback from folks on that. I'm going to run through just a few because it's hard to go through 120 actions in 10 minutes or less. So when we're talking about how we live, so this is specifically about helping Londoners respond and prepare for climate change at home. A number of different actions in this category, specifically looking at facilitating energy conservation, efficiency, renewable energy, and major energy retrofits of residential buildings. One of the ideas there would be to use local improvement charges, which is something I think we might hear a little bit more about from Gabby, hopefully. And also supporting and developing collaborative approaches to end energy poverty. Those two are linked and related. And unfortunately, the reality is low-income households typically end up spending more per capita on energy than other households. And so this is something that we really want to cast our attention to when looking at which actions to prioritize for early movement as part of this plan. And I've also noted here that we're looking at supporting and encouraging urban agriculture and strengthening local food systems. So we've got a few ideas in there that you can check out in the primer, but we're really interested to hear in feedback from the community on what other things people are already doing, as well as other things that we might be able to help out with. How we green, so building a greener city by reducing our impact and protecting natural resources. We're known as the Forest City. And so we're looking at ways that we can advance the strength and resilience of our natural heritage and our trees. Ideas including, supporting and bolstering the city's Tree Me program, which is effectively, for those of you unfamiliar with it, a program where the city provides funds to community groups to actually get more trees planted on private property. And how we move, you'll recall from our greenhouse gas emissions distribution there that our personal vehicles are one of the biggest culprits, or the biggest categorical culprit for greenhouse gas emissions. So we're looking at things that we can do as a city, but also again as community partners to accelerate the expansion and improvement of active transportation infrastructure and the use of that infrastructure too. And similarly, expanding and improving public transit services. And again, these are two items that speak specifically to a green recovery. These are transportation modes, people moving modes that are much broadly used, and certainly the folks from lower income households we're going to see the benefit of improved active transit and transit systems. And how we prosper, driving innovation in our community that helps London become climate change resilient. A number of different things here, particularly looking at dealing with cities' preparedness for dealing with extreme climate events. And although we've specified formal neighborhood scale emergency preparedness and response group support with the sort of climate emergency lens on it, that is also something that would very much help in a pandemic situation when communities really need to band together to support one another. So there's a few ideas in there that we'd like to explore. And then also encouraging resource and waste management initiatives for London businesses. So implementing food waste reduction initiatives at grocery stores and restaurants, and a number of other really fantastic things in that line there. So ultimately what we are asking is that folks head out to the website and look at our discussion primer. And it is a bit of a beefy document, but really there's a broad suite of changes there and actions that we can take both from the city and from the community that can make a real difference. So we want to hear which ones seem to be the ones that will implement and uptake. And if there's things that we've left off the list, of course, we want to hear that as well. And so the idea is that we're going to be pulling all these comments together and hopefully getting a draft out to the public sort of late Q1, early Q2 next year, so that we can get moving on some of these things. And incorporated in that plan, we also want to hear from organizations and individuals about the things that you're doing. Because again, it is a community plan. And we'd like it to be reflecting of all of the different things that community organizations are taking on. And I promised I would show this slide again. So getinvolved.london.ca/climate for feedback. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. So I will now invite Grand Chief Joel Abram to unmute and begin his presentation.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this event. I appreciate that. And I'm not going to be probably as technical as the other folks were. I think maybe I'll talk a little bit more philosophical implications and those sorts of things. So I think one of the things that we always do, I'm from Oneida, we're part of the Iroquois, and one of the things that we always do when we get together is we do something that's called a Ganehalat Nuksla, or the Thanksgiving address. And basically it's what we call the words that come before all others. So I'll just do a really brief version of it. Like some people can go on for an hour, so I'm not gonna do that. So I'll just do a really quick version, and I'll kind of explain the meaning behind that really briefly. When he's that day, Swadahonsionska Nahe, Dietana Haladun Gajokwa, Dietana Haladun Yuki Noha, Ne Adun Hitsla, Yuki Yawi, Dietana Haladun Nen Honega Sun, Dietana Haladun Nen Gunji Sun, Dietana Haladun Nen Odelha Sun, Ute Sukale Unukwa Toku, Dietana Haladun Nen Hoji Noa Sun, Dietana Haladun Nen Gagwa Sun, Dietana Haladun Nen Wanyanuta, Dietana Haladun Nen Godolio Sun, Dietana Haladun Nen Hoji Doha Sun, Kala Dietana Haladun Nen Galute Sun, Dietana Haladun Gaye Negavela Get, Dietana Haladun Nen Yogi Sota, Late Sayo Deza, Dietana Haladun Nen Yogi Sota Wanidale, Dahatone Haladun Hito Jiha Yodahalo, Kala Dietana Haladun Nen Hoji Stokwa No, Dietana Haladun Nen Gaye Neangwedage, Agagun Huska Jiha Donini, Hokwanigula, Dietone Haladun, so going a diesel, Chinate Loyan Down on it. Nindahage Hokanigu, down it, Niole, Negali Wakuini, Chinati, Galioya Dakwa, Ne Asno Hege, Skana G, with 22 ni, down it, Nindahage Hokanigu, down it. So basically, what I just said there is that's our prayer that we usually have when we open meetings and when we close meetings sometimes too. And basically, I'm just asking everyone to listen for a while. We're going to offer greetings to all the people and give our Thanksgiving for the Mother Earth. And basically, we start off, with the Mother Earth, the people, the earth, the waters, things in the waters, the fish, all the root life, the plant life, medicines, even the insects, different foods that we have, fruits, animals, birds, trees, the four winds, thunders, moon, sun, stars, and to all the spiritual beings that we believe in, and everything. Basically, we give thanks to everything, to the Creator, for everything He's prepared for us. And if I forgot anything, I guess that would be between you and the Creator. So that's just coming from our mindset about how we should be thankful and that everything was placed on here on earth for what we need. Also, I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe a couple of treaties as well. One that I think that we should all be, partaking in. One is called the One Dish, One Spoon Treaty, and it was an old treaty dating back to 1701, so not really that old, but kind of old. And it's symbolized by a white wampum belt. I had one here. I don't have it with me now, but it's just a white wampum belt with a little purple circle in the middle, and basically, and indicated that this area, what we call the beaver hunting grounds, covers a lot of Ontario, part of New York State, different areas. We would treat it as one dish with one spoon. No knives would be used, so that they wouldn't be cutting each other, and basically meant that the nations that occupied this area would treat the area as if it was one dish, and we would have one spoon, and meaning that we would share in the resources. So it was a covenant between nations, not only to share in the resources, that was also a covenant to ensure that those resources are maintained for future generations to enjoy. And it wasn't only a covenant between nations, it was also a covenant with nature itself. And that we recognize that nature has its own spirit, water has its own spirit, and that those should be respected and only taken for what you need to survive, and so that it would be there again for future generations to enjoy. So I want to just relay that bit to you. I do have another wampum belt here. I'll show it to you. This is what we call the Gaswanta, or the two-row wampum, and it's an old wampum, and it was probably the first wampum ever made between Europeans and First Nations. And it's made of shells from a clam, and the two rows represent the boats of, it was between the Dutch, I guess, then the Iroquois. So one row would represent the Dutch people, their government, their laws, their customs. Traveling through the river of life is what this means. And the Iroquois people with their customs, laws, traditions, and people, also traveling a parallel path down the river of life. And there's 3 rows of beads between the 2 rows, and those signified peace, respect, and friendship. And that neither boat would ever try to tell the other where to go, but that we would have peace, respect, friendship between us as we travel down the river of life once again. So, and that was the basis of, that was the first treaty, and that was the basis of all subsequent treaties between Dutch, between English, and any other, crown, I guess you could say. So what does that have to do with, green recovery? I think it has a lot to do with it, with post-COVID. And I think it's a time of reflection, for a lot of people to think about other things other than the day-to-day, I know that it's a time of hardship for everyone. And as we saw, it's been a time of renewal for a lot of things within nature. But again, it was said before, it's only temporary as things gear back up. But I also think it's a time for us to think about how we do things moving forward and sort of have a fresh slate in a clean way. So as a Grand Chief of AIAI, we do advocacy for our 7 member nations, trying to protect treaty rights and those sorts of things. One of the things we're talking about now is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and how that should be implemented throughout Canada and indeed throughout Ontario as well. Recently, we filed a judicial review of Bill 197 that the Ford government has put through. That was a COVID relief bill, but they also snuck in some significant amendments to the Environmental Assessment Act, which would basically prevent whatever projects the minister deemed as not to be subject to an EA, they would not be subject to an EA. Thereby, that would cut out the consultation not only with public stakeholders within the province of Ontario, but also with Indigenous peoples as well. And where a project may have significant consequences to the environment, that was too much so we did a judicial challenge on that. We don't know where that'll end up yet, but we think that there's a significant duty to consult and accommodate not only citizens of Ontario, but First Nations to whom we decided to share this land. I noticed at the beginning of the land acknowledgement, it talked about land cessures or cessions, and that was not the intent of the treaties. They were treaties of sharing, not only sharing of the land, but sharing of responsibility for that land. So in that respect, we are all treaty people in one way or another, and that we should learn what those are and learn our obligations under those. So I think there are, some practical things that we can talk about in terms of how to move forward. But I think one of the things, philosophically wise, is that we recognize that the land has a spirit, that the water has a spirit, and the health of that environment affects all of us, and it'll affect our children. So I think that's something that we all have to kind of take into respect, and when we talk about moving forward in a good way. So I think that's the majority of what I wanted to say. Although I did, been talking to some folks about some good projects, and that we're having there's a housing crisis, there's a homeless crisis, especially with the effects of the pandemic and whatnot. So been talking with some friends about the possibility of doing a pilot on earth ships about using recyclable materials to build homes for those who don't have one, or just to reuse some of those things so they don't go back in landfills, or they don't get shipped over to China, who is now rejecting a lot of recyclables now, from what I understand. So, we should begin to learn to use a lot of what we throw away and make it useful. So I think those kind of projects are good. In terms of Zoom, we're doing one of the things now that's probably going to result in a lot of open office space, not only in London, but surrounding area, where a lot of people can do their jobs from home rather than going to a cubicle and doing the same thing that they can do from home in a cubicle. There's a lot of jobs that don't require that though, but I think that's going to result in some other empty office spaces. So how can we utilize those as well? So, there's a lot of things to think about coming out of this pandemic, but I wanted to bring the majority of my presentation to talk about, the spirituality of our environment, and how that should be respected moving forward, so that it's sustainable for the next 7 generations, and how we can begin to clean our environment. So I think that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joel. Now I will invite Gabby from Clean Air Partnership to start her presentation.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks, Joel. Actually, that was really interesting because I was wondering about the wampum belt, and it was really nice to see one in the passageways and the journeys along of numerous different cultures, ideally moving together towards a shared destination or a shared goal in mind, and that was really helpful. So hi everybody, I'm Gabby from the Clean Air Partnership. I'm joining you from Hamilton, which is on the traditional territories of the Erie, neutral Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas. And I'm really glad to be able to kind of chat with you a little bit about home energy efficiency retrofits, how important and critical they are, how challenging they are, and how we can advance this huge opportunity to find those synergies between our climate change goals, our local economic development goals, our job creation goals, as well as helping to build the value proposition for climate action as an effort that actually achieves numerous policy goals while also building resilience into our communities. So I'll just share my screen just to, did I share my screen? Sorry, what did I do? Yes, here we are. All right. And I'll give a little bit of background information on how important this the building retrofit sector is, and some of the work taking place. So as you know, we are far behind where we need to be in terms of our climate change targets and achieving our goals. But a lot of municipalities are passing climate emergencies and really adopting aggressive citywide targets that really need to be able to address 3 key sectors within our communities: buildings, transportation, and waste. And really every single municipal climate action plan that I know about has building energy efficiency retrofits in play right now that are identified as a target a priority action. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I'm just going to check. My computer screen is just not supporting. I just want to make sure. Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to kind of highlight and make sure that you guys are all able to see my screen. So buildings, they are huge. From the kind of a province of Ontario, they represent 22% of our GHGs, but from where many of our communities are, they represent almost anywhere between 40 to 50, 55% of CO2 emissions from our communities. They are really important in terms of the industrial sector, the commercial building sector, and the residential sector. But one thing that's really important to remember on this one, the residential sector has not been served the way it should be served in terms of its total contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. A lot of the utility programs really focused on advancing energy efficiency retrofits between the commercial sector and the industrial sector, more so than they did in the residential sector. And I'll explain a little bit why that's the case as well in terms of the challenges with the residential sector. So in order to achieve our 2030 and 2050 targets, we have huge endeavor ahead of us. There are over 3.7 million single family, single detached households in Ontario. In order to achieve our targets, 60% of homes need to be much more energy efficient than there would need to be. In other words, where we need to be, we have to kind of achieve to actually ramp ourselves up. That's 74,000 home energy efficiency renovations per year. If you're like thinking of from your perspective, like, oh my God, 75,000 home renovations need to happen every year. Honestly, it's enough to kind of make you scared and was like run screaming. But I did also want to kind of highlight, we do have a huge challenge in terms of building the momentum, but at some point in time, we know that this will take off and this is going to be a huge growth sector. And there then we'll be able to achieve the ramping and scaling up that we need to do. But we need to build the foundation of these programs to enable this buildup of home energy efficiency retrofits to take place over time. The one thing that's most important onto this one is it not only just about the GHG reductions that we know we need to achieve, but this is a huge opportunity for local economic development and job creation. And if that's not a priority in our post-COVID, or I shouldn't say we're not even post-COVID, but you know what I meant, in our COVID recovery, this is really a key area on this opportunity. These are good quality jobs. They can't be outsourced. These products often can't be bought on Amazon. So they really do have local economic development opportunities and job creation opportunities associated with it. In addition, one of the key areas of why there's such a huge also element of reducing people's vulnerability to energy price increases over time or carbon price increases over time is that most of the money that we spend on energy doesn't stay within our community. It leaves our community never to benefit us again. Most of the money spent on energy efficiency stays within the community. So if we are switching funding, so instead of actually putting money towards our energy costs and switching that to pay our energy efficiency retrofit programs and our efforts, then we're actually taking something that used to leave our community and actually reinvesting it in our community, either in terms of jobs or products that are bought to advance that, or it could also mean in the sense of reducing people's energy costs and thereby leaving them with more money to spend locally as well. So I did want to kind of highlight that synergies between our home energy efficiency retrofits, how critical they are to advancing us towards our GHG reduction targets, but also the synergies it has with local economic development and utility bill savings, highlighting the really important of one of the key things that's really the pre and post kind of evaluations of people who have undertaken energy efficiency retrofit programs. Usually the utility bill savings is what gets them to say yes, but after they've done their energy efficiency retrofit program within their home, the first most important benefit they identify is that their home is more comfortable, it's healthier, they can actually sit by their window and actually not freeze or sweat to death in summertime, but they actually get more of their home available to them to use in a comfortable way. There's also the element of increasing the property values. The home energy efficiency programs and investments that a homeowner puts into their home would increase their property values. There's a number of other kind of enabling factors that we need to advance to really benefit from those increased property values that I'll speak to later, but it's no doubt about it that it actually does have that side effect or side benefit. It really does reduce residents' vulnerability to energy price increases over time. And it really, what also was really key important is it helps to build resilience to power outages and extreme temperatures. So if you actually, let's just say if you have a much more energy, your building envelope and your energy efficiency of your home is better, it means that if the power goes out, there's going to be a longer time period where your house is still going to be within hospitable temperatures before you actually have to find another place to go. And then if you actually also augment your energy efficiency measures with renewables or storage, then you actually really do have a resilient home that's not necessarily vulnerable to power outages and having to find a different place to go. From the municipal perspective, one of the main reasons why they really want to advance these home energy efficiency retrofit programs is to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. I was speaking again about the local economic development and jobs. There's really opportunities to get the municipalities, the utilities, our kind of energy system kind of managers and planners to look at where we can invest in energy efficiency and distributed energy and renewable energy in a way that reduces our in need for energy investments, either at the infrastructure level in terms of our larger grid, air pollution benefits, and then really wanted to reduce vulnerability of their residents to energy and carbon price increases over time. So one of the key things that stops a lot of people from doing energy efficiency retrofit programs, there's a number of reasons, but I'll speak to one of them first. It's the upfront capital cost burden. So one of the key things that municipalities are looking to do is really to provide loans to residents in order to undertake their energy efficiency retrofits. And then those loans get paid back as a surcharge on a property tax bill, or could be on an on-bill financing of a utility if we can get utilities to get into this game as well. Then you're just, instead of paying your energy costs, that energy cost savings is actually being allocated to loan to pay back for the energy efficiency retrofits that took place in order to get those energy savings. So in some ways, what we're really trying to do is help kind of switch energy costs into loan repayments for a period of time, whether it be 5, 10, 15 years, whatever the term is, that the homeowner decides that they want to go, is switching the energy costs to loan repayments. Once the loan's repaid, all the savings are in the homeowner's hands then. So that's redressing one of the burdens that really limits the uptake of home energy efficiency. That's the upfront capital costs and helping with financing. I did want to kind of highlight there are many other challenges associated with home energy efficiency retrofits that also need to be addressed in terms of the programs. And we really got to streamline these programs to make it easier for property owners to manage home energy efficiency retrofits. They're not the easiest thing in the world to manage. They often require a number of different contractors that the homeowner has to bring on. As anyone knows, going through renovation, it's nothing that anybody looks forward to. And there's challenges with it. So we really also need to support homeowners to kind of streamline the energy efficiency retrofit program for them. So that's another key area where municipalities are looking and partnerships are being developed to kind of build the army that we need in order to help homeowners undertake their energy efficiency measures. So some of the other kind of key areas that are also really important to help build the value proposition outside of just GHG and energy savings for homeowners is they really need to work on building contractor and realtor awareness and engagement on the value of energy efficiency, on bringing homeowners when they're looking for a new home or when they're purchasing their first home to bring in energy considerations into their decision making. And that's one area that's really important as well. And then we really also need to ensure that contractors have the skills that they need to ensure that these retrofits are being done in the best way possible and that they're achieving their goals on this. The other critical piece on helping to build the value proposition and increase property values in terms of the energy efficiency value proposition for homeowners is we really need to find ways to blue box energy efficiency. One of the key things that's always surprised me, and I'm not sure if you guys have also been surprised about this, but you actually often find a lot more uptake from homeowners on putting PV panels on their roof than you do on energy efficiency. And when you really kind of dig into that a little bit more, one of the things you find is that energy efficiency is hard to get people excited about because it's often hidden behind walls. You don't necessarily see energy efficiency in the same way you would find like hardwood floors or PV panels on your rooftop. So you don't get the ability to show them off, and you don't actually get the ability to kind of get that gratification that we all look from when we spend a lot of money. We want to see what's come out of that money. And energy efficiency is not the sexiest thing in the world, even though it has the best return on investment. So often linking up the energy efficiency programs with renewable energy projects are also really key kind of excellent program design elements of this. So where are we at now? I did want to kind of highlight for new buildings and green development standards, but I'm not going to go because I'm looking at the time and I don't want to waste too much time, and I really would love to kind of have more discussion about it. But I did want to kind of highlight from a new buildings perspective, we know that every single building, new building built right now, that's just built to Ontario Building Code standards, will need to be retrofitted within 10 to 15, 20 years. And we know that it's going to cost a lot more and achieve a lot less once it's retrofitted post-construction. But if we build with getting to zero emissions in mind right from the get-go, we know that we're going to be able to move towards where we need to do, and that's going to be better from the homeowner's perspective. A lot of times, whenever you're kind of trying to push increased energy efficiency standards on new buildings, the affordability challenge, the affordability kind of conversation kind of comes onto it. But one of the things we do need to kind of help people understand is that affordability is associated with the purchase price of the home, but there's affordability over the operating cost of that home as well. And when you're really thinking about affordability, both those things should be brought together. So I did want to kind of highlight for any of those kind of organizations working to advance home energy efficiency retrofits, there's some great resources in the that I've linked here, both on existing buildings, the state of PACE programs or LIC and home retrofit financing programs across the United States and Canada. There's also some information on green development standards and how new builds are moving towards net zero emissions. I did want to kind of highlight Better Homes TO. That's a website that's geared towards helping homeowners navigate the very complicated world of home energy efficiency retrofits. And of course, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. And I did want to kind of leave more time for discussions and questions and that kind of stuff. So thank you very much for allowing me the time to share this story with you. And I'll stop sharing now. And I'm sorry, I wasn't able to check the chat because I'm not very good at multitasking.
No, that's okay. You did great. Thank you for your presentation, Gabby. We did get one question during your talk, so I'll start with that one. And it is from Tanya, and it asks, how much money do you believe it takes for the average homeowner to do an energy retrofit of their home?
It depends on how deep you want to go in terms of the energy efficiency, like your outcome you're trying to achieve. Often, if you're looking at trying to get that 35% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, you're probably looking at about, $15,000 to kind of, $20,000 in terms of the value proposition to be able to kind of get to those that savings. If you were looking to kind of, like I kind of put it in, there's different phases associated with how you'd be doing your energy efficiency retrofits. If you're just kind of looking at it from a lighting and looking like improving your lighting, really, not expensive to do. You can easily do that. If you're looking to upgrade, let's say your mechanical systems of your furnace or your air conditioner just needs to be upgraded in terms of kind of moving for that kind of getting the better energy efficiency product, it's really, it's a no-brainer to me that you would want to kind of do that. Where it gets to be a little bit more challenging is when you start doing the building envelope work, which is really, really critical to where we need to go on energy efficiency. And that has a longer term payback, hence the reason the importance of actually financing for this to deal with the upfront capital costs and attaching it to the property rather than to an individual, because the benefit lies with the homeowner, with the home, not with the homeowner. So one of the key things that's really important on this one is that it actually attaches the loan, which are often, if you're going to do building envelope work, you're looking at a longer term, about like 15 years if you wanted your energy savings to pay for that loan. You would then be kind of saying, like, I don't know if I'm going to be in my home for 15 years. I don't know if it's that kind of investment I've just made of $15,000 to increase the energy efficiency in my home is actually going to increase my resale value. You don't know that for sure. So attaching that loan to the property means that the person doesn't take a risk, a financial risk by this. They invest in it for the home, then gets passed on to the next homeowner. The next homeowner continues the payments on that LIC, and over time, the energy savings are paying for that loan. And then once the loan's paid back, then all the savings belong to the person who's in the property at that time. So I would say if you wanted to kind of go into the fuel switching and going to net zero, then you have a little bit more challenging kind of business case to develop. And that's where I think it's really, really critical that we have home energy labeling and helping to build that value proposition. I don't know about other people, but I would love to have some sort of home labeling where we can identify which homes are climate change champion homes, which ones are actually reaching that, been putting through the effort, so that you can see it right away. And that's what I kind of call the blue boxing of energy efficiency, so that we can kind of then share, like, see what are, like, get the social norms working in our favor. So again, that kind of varies. You could spend a lot of money in terms of trying to want to move to net zero, but I see this as kind of a roadmap for homeowners to identify what roadmap makes the most sense for them, both on their time frame and their ability to kind of advance energy efficiency retrofits, as well as in their kind of overall, you know, investments that they're making in their home over time.
Awesome, thanks. And so just a reminder to everyone who is participating, if you do have questions, you can share them in the chat, and we're going to address them now to all speakers. We do have another question directed to you, Gabby, which
I was just going to respond to Mel. Yes, you are absolutely right. Where the education of what Mel was mentioning is that it is a bit, when you attach the loan to the property, it can be a bit of a liability in terms of the sale of the home. The reason for that is because it is attached to the property, and in every single one of our minds, that lien on the property, we've gotten into our heads that only liens are always negative things, because in the past they have been negative things associated. When you're looking at a home and you see a lien, it's usually sets off warning bells for people. That's just because liens have often been a negative thing. This is actually a positive lien. This shows that you've actually made an investment in this home and that it's actually achieving a higher standard. There is still a huge amount of education that needs to take place amongst homeowners as they're taking into consideration all the things they need to take into consideration when they're purchasing a home. Energy efficiency is simply one of many things that they have to take into consideration. But yes, we have a fair amount of work to do in terms of building energy literacy and the value of these types of programs to turn what was normally considered liens and negative thoughts into a positive lien on that property as a result of the energy efficiency upgrades.
Awesome, thank you. And then seeing a comment here, we educated the local real estate agents about solar panels. They had no reference base before sale locally. So yeah, definitely a lot of work needing to be done to kind of shift the norm to having renewable energy tied to your home.
Yeah.
Awesome. So there are a couple questions that we had prepared for speakers. And this one we're going to direct if all speakers could answer and just kind of do like a rapid fire. So the question is, what is the most important thing that individuals can do to support a green recovery? So I think we'll start with Mike, and then we'll just see who wants to jump in after Mike.
Great, thanks, Leah. So the most important thing that people can do, it might sound really simple, but talk about it. One of the biggest things to the climate action impediments, barriers to climate action is people seem to think that they can't do anything about it, or that the conversation is not one that is prominent in daily life, and so it's not something that is at the forefront of consciousness. So, I mean, we all have a voice, and we really need to use it. And so, if there are specific things about climate change that you want to see action on specifically the synergy between climate action and recovery from COVID, you need to talk about it. So get in touch with your local councillor, local politicians, and voice your concerns and tell them what you would like to get behind.
Yeah, to kind of build on that. Yeah, I'm assuming this is popcorn styles. I'm just jumping in, butt me out if I'm not supposed to be here. But yeah, to kind of build on Mike's point there, just again, like in a workplace context too, I think I really liked, Leah, how you put that in terms of thinking about community in different ways. In the way that you identify could be your geographic community, but also sort of your spheres of influence, and workplaces are a really big one. Employers really do care about attracting and retaining good people. And it's one of the things we hear over and over again, that when their employees talk about this work as being important to them, then it really gives them a drive to invest in this work. So yeah, talk about it to your peers, and also talk about it to your employer.
Awesome. I think Gabby's going next.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Please talk. We need to talk about this more. We need to get our more bandwidth in terms of the conversations at the family level, at the workplace level, within politicians, within both at all levels of government. They really need to hear that people care and want action and expect action, because we know that there's so many other different demands. We really do need to kind of build that support for climate action, and where the synergies exist on this one, because there's lots of co-benefits that we don't give enough bandwidth to in terms of the rationale for why we'd be advancing climate actions. It's always considered something that's being taken away, not something that's actually improving our collective investments in our society and our communities.
I would just echo what everyone else has been saying, with the added layer of personal and community responsibility, for the environment, and just to spread education and awareness as best as you can without trying to, peel people off, but, do it in a respectful way. And just remind everyone that we're here for we want to make sure this place is still a good place for the next 7 generations. And it's not just for us, it's for our future too.
That's awesome. Thanks for all your responses on that question. I do have another question directed to Grand Chief Joel Abram. And this question is, what are ways that settlers can support Indigenous land rights? I know that's a very big question, but love to hear your thoughts on it.
It is. I think the best part you can do is to educate yourself, educate your family, educate your friends, and to know the facts and the truth. A lot of what Canada's sovereignty to the land is predicated upon the doctrine of discovery and the doctrine of terra nullius, which basically meant that if a king or someone came over a long time ago and found that the inhabitants were not Christian, they were not to be considered human, therefore the land is empty, then you can claim the land. And so that's still the legal predication upon which Canada claims its sovereignty over the land. And, that's I would say that's slightly discriminatory, but, I think that's the truth. It's not anything to feel bad about, but it's the fact of the matter. And it's something you can educate yourself about, and educate, your politicians about, and your children about, just so that at least, if nothing else, people know the truth. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a question that came up during Mike's presentation. And this is also a big question, but you shared the pillars of the primer and a bunch of actions. And I'm wondering how the projects will get prioritized in a way.
Yeah, loaded question. It's great though. So ultimately, I think I did mention this, that we're looking for community ownership of some of these activities, some of the actions that we'd like to see taking place. There is only a limited bandwidth within the city to actually execute and sort of roll out certain activities. So we really are looking for that community partnership piece to increase the capacity for action. We're in a state right now where we're looking for feedback from people. So if there's an overwhelming support for certain actions within the plan, and those actions are going to result in real emissions soon, those are going to be the actions that rise to the top, very likely. Obviously, there's going to have to be some some screening for feasibility in terms of, whether or not actions, if there's actions outside of those in the primer that are being suggested, are within the sort of realm of municipal responsibility, if we can actually do things legally speaking, right? So that would certainly come into play when talking about prioritizing things. But yeah, I mean, we really honestly are looking for people to tell us what is the top of their list. And like I said, there's 120 different supporting actions. All of them will make a difference. We have this plan as a long-term plan, so it's not like we need to have everything we want to do immediately right now. We just need to start doing something. And I really need to coach that, because there's a lot of things that are already happening in the community that are great, that are moving us in this direction. But in terms of really prioritizing things and setting a course for hitting that net zero, we really need to have that plan laid out. So long-winded answer to say, you guys tell us what we should prioritize. How about that?
That's great. Yeah. And I also liked your point about, there are things happening in the community and we can continue doing those awesome things. And then there are also other projects that we can start. So that's why you need to share your feedback to the Climate Emergency Action Plan on the city's website.
Absolutely.
And okay, so I saw a question in the chat directed to Gabby. And it says, are any municipal bylaws being enacted to ensure all new developments are using heat pumps instead of gas furnaces with the appropriate building envelope insulation to support it?
So a number of municipalities, there's no Canadian municipality that I know of that has a natural gas ban in place. As much as we would like to, I'll put my, I would love to kind of take on that fight and see what happens. But I think one of the things that's really the way municipalities are moving forward is they're setting greenhouse gas, green development standards. Now, green development standards looks at a whole bunch of different sustainability outcomes that the municipality is trying to achieve. Energy and emissions is simply one of a number of different types of measures. It could look in terms of how close is it to green space? How close is it to public transit? How close is it to active transportation infrastructure? How much precipitation is dealt with on site? But certainly the way municipalities are moving forward on the new building side with regards to emissions is setting green development standards and working to put in the phased approach of how they're going to achieve net zero. So municipalities in themselves don't have the authority to say, I'm not going to give you a building permit if you don't actually build to a higher standard than the Ontario Building Code. That is something that we need to work with the province on, to give municipalities additional authorities to actually be able to have a stronger role to play in what kind of communities get developed and what kind of requirements are put onto them in order for them to move towards net zero. But there's many other mechanisms that can be done to kind of drive the market towards that direction. Green standards are one of the mechanisms that our municipalities are using for that. But I also did want to kind of highlight, there's still the need to really improve the authorities municipalities have to say what kind of developments do they actually want within their community. So that's something that I'd say is like a key outcome that we're trying to achieve, and that we really would love to have the kind of, right now municipalities can't say you build to this standard or I don't give you a building permit. So we need to build more authorities on the part of municipalities to implement the change that they want to see happen.
Awesome, thanks. And I'll just highlight, Joel mentioned in the chat, so London should continue separating wastewater from storm drains to permanently halt raw sewage going into the Thames and affecting people downstream and Lake Erie algae. And yes, I also want to say, in one of our Instagram posts where we asked people what they thought the most important green project for green recovery was, that was one of the responses as well. So lots of people emphasizing that separating wastewater from storm drains is a key issue. One question for Priyanka here. In just a short amount of time, is there a key myth that small and medium enterprises have when it comes to setting sustainability goals that you would just like to bust right now? And
oh wow, okay, well that's good to put me on the spot there. I don't know, I would say maybe that it's a lot more scary than it needs to be. I think that, you know, once a business gets started, they can actually accomplish a surprising amount with not that much money and not that much effort. And I think, you know, even something like setting a 20% reduction goal, like committing to something is in and of itself really valuable. And I would say that, you know, for any business that wants to do this, just get started. And I think a lot of people, especially in this day and age, will really appreciate the transparency and the journey. And I think that's what we need to do a better job of celebrating, that we're all, you know, we're all imperfect beings, but we're all on this journey together. And I think that as long as we are making strides in the right direction and doing our level best, that's really what we need to be supporting and celebrating and elevating. So maybe that's not quite the answer to your question, but maybe a nice sentiment to leave on.
No, I think that was great. Sorry to put you on the spot. That was a great answer. I am going to go back to sharing my screen now because I noticed that it's 8:28 and we're probably going to wrap up the evening. So I just wanted to highlight this slide about getting involved with the city's climate emergency action plan. So immediately after this workshop, you can submit your ideas and voice your opinion, review the discussion primer that Mike had referenced, and share your thoughts on climate action and creating a green and just economic recovery in London. I also would like to thank all of our speakers and our organizers and attendees from tonight and from our previous Green in the City sessions that we started back in October. We have really good news. These sessions have all been recorded and we will be releasing them all next week. So we'll be sending information on how to tune into the event recordings after this event. So please stay tuned for that. I'm also happy to share, as Joanna had mentioned at the beginning of the evening, that our partners at the London Environmental Network, the City of London, and the London Public Library will be continuing with a winter edition of Green in the City with a deeper focus on climate issues and local action that we can all take. So again, please look for an announcement in late December for more details about that. Lastly, I just wanted to thank the sponsors of the London Environmental Network for their support. And a final thank you to, again, our speakers and every one of you who attended tonight or any of our past Green in the City events. I hope you all have a good night, and we're going to end it here. So goodbye, everyone.